Well, a very warm welcome to this session of our WPP BAV Alibaba 11/11 Global Shopping Festival broadcast. My name is David Roth from WPP, and it's a pleasure to have you watching this session. We couldn't be in better hands for this session because we're going to be talking about experiences. Now, those of you that have been tuning in during the course of the last week or so couldn't have failed to notice the amount of times that references were made to experiences in one form or another, and how experiences were driving some of the engagement more and more over the 11/11 period, from when it was first started some 13 years ago, where the experience was very much around the percentage discount, to, as we've seen this year, where the experience is multifaceted, including virtual experiences in the metaverse. I'm very delighted to be joined by both the Matthew Nolan, who's the head of experiences for Mindshare in China, and the chief product officer for Mindshare in China as well, Akanksha Jain. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, both of you. You are experts in the field that we're going to be talking about, the how, I suppose. We could sum it up that where advertising is going to be much more experiential based. So we're delighted that you're joining us live from Shanghai. It's getting late in the early evening in Shanghai. So thank you very much indeed for joining us. I suppose both of you, the road from pure advertising, if we could ever describe advertising in those terms, probably not a great way of describing it, but to experience is something that's being accelerated very much by what we have already seen during the 2021 11/11 period. And I'm sure that the experiential elements that are new this year will soon find their way not just across China, but across the rest of the world. So I'm going to hand it over to both of you. Thank you very much indeed. And we are very much looking forward to understanding more about the road to experience.
Great. Thanks, David. And, as mentioned, you've already said it, and I think we've been, hearing it throughout these sessions, that experiences really are, a critical cornerstone of how audiences are engaging with brands, both this 11/11 as well as across all touch points. And that's really why we at Mindshare believe that the future of advertising really needs to be thought about in terms of experiences. Every touch point has the ability to be not just, a static ad, but an opportunity for really rich consumer engagement. So we're going to dive into, why we believe that and some of the key changes that we're seeing take place, namely the collision of physical and virtual experiences, Gen Z's connection and how they're driven by experiences and how those fuel their purchase decisions. And finally, inspiration through a very simple framework that can inform how we begin to design experiences for brands, for our clients, et cetera. So as we dive into this, we want to start by defining how experiences have been traditionally thought of. There's something physical. I can see it, I can touch it, I can smell it. But the problem with that is that ultimately experiences then become siloed in an offline environment. Now, when that gets to campaign planning and where we want to invest our media dollars, we ultimately, feel like we have to make choices between online, digital, which we know is continually growing, and offline types of engagement. Those are in competition with each other. But we're here today to say, this is a myth, that ultimately they are not necessarily adversaries, but rather allies. So it's not URL versus IRL. It's not the digital world versus in real life. That's fake news.
And we all know this already. I mean, everyone on the call is very well aware that China is already leading the world when it comes to digital adoption, when it comes to mobile adoption, be it mobile payments. And this really is even more so when we talk about Gen Z. But it's interesting to note that, yes, while Gen Z are primarily digital, in fact, even in the context of Double 11, if you look at Tmall's luxury pavilion, we see that 70% of, Tmall luxury pavilions users are all Gen Z. And yet, if you actually deep dive, it's interesting to note that almost half of these Gen Z talk about physically visiting stores to touch, feel, try before they actually buy.
And I think, what's so fascinating about that insight is that this is a uniquely Chinese Gen Z behavior, this need for physical interaction with brand or product, much more so when compared to their global counterparts. Now, even more interesting than that, it's also Gen Z versus any other generation. So yes, while Gen Z are digital natives more than any generation that's come before them, they are seeking out these physical interactions with a product or brand before they make decisions, let's say online, on Tmall for Double 11 when they're buying a product. I think ultimately, the reality is it's physical. Our consumers are always going to want to touch the things that they buy. And that's something we really need to take into consideration as we're building campaigns, as we're building user journeys and consumer journeys for for e-commerce festival moments.
In fact, in one of the interesting data points that we've seen that luxury pop-up stores have been seeing a more than 100% growth year on year for the last 6 to 7 years. And this is really interesting because at the same time, obviously, digital has been accelerating hugely. This is clearly testimony that a lot of our clients, especially in the luxury sector, are already seeing the benefit in providing people with physical experiences that are also able to connect them and give them digital street creds. And you might think, what is this digital street cred? Well, when it comes to China, digital street creds are extremely important and extremely valued by Gen Z. To those familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy, this is an easy to understand chart. But I think for the generations born in the 80s and before in China, a large part of their needs are really fulfilled by brands that talk about safety and security oriented needs. But over the last few years, we've seen an evolution in those needs towards more social sharing. But when it comes to Gen Z today, they're really all about showcasing and bringing their best self to be seen by the world. And that's why China's social commerce or Wang Hong culture is so popular. Live streaming is one of the most popular career choices for people here today. In fact, over 80% of Gen Z today actively want to be part of experiences that give them these digital social bragging rights.
So, whether we're thinking of, Gen Z's need for street cred on online social space that's fueled by offline experiences, or how really critical, particularly in the luxury sector, offline experiences are for online purchase decision making, we can no longer separate, URL and IRL. Yet again, they're not adversaries, they are allies. So it's not URL versus IRL, it's URL times IRL. Now, the implication here is that brands really need to work harder than ever as we build campaigns, user journeys, to ensure that the digital and physical worlds are working in harmony with one another. Now, looking forward or where we are today, we already are seeing brands and case studies where we're seeing a new balance is being struck. I think a great example of this, and something so unique to China, is the provocation that we hear that, oh, retail's dead or retail's dying, or retail behaviors won't recover in a post-COVID world. Well, actually, we're here today to tell you that retail is Gen Z, or retail is changing for Gen Z. A great example of this is TX Huaihai here in Shanghai. Now, This is a retail experience that has really changed the model, where their leasing model is actually based on aggregate revenue share. And what this has allowed them to do is act not as a traditional mall, but as basically a pop-up emporium where the sellers are constantly refreshing and injecting new energy, new experiences that keep audiences coming back. But obviously, thinking of digital street cred, keeping them sharing on key social channels that recruits new audiences. And these type of experiences within retail are really, really critical and really driving a lot of innovation as we think about how the digital and physical worlds can go hand in hand across a consumer journey.
And another great example would be in Nike. I think it's no secret that globally Nike have been focusing and pivoting to direct to consumer when it comes to their online channels. But equally, they have reinvented the role of their retail space as the culmination ground for some of their digital experiences. So while they continue to pivot to DTC, on the one hand, they're also rethinking the role of their physical store. In fact, a great example from Nike is their Nike Rise concept stores.
Became disruptors across categories, and these are domestically produced brands. While yes, they started their journey by being disruptive online, actually when we track their growth over time, we see that offline becomes a critical unlock for them. Now, a perfect example of this is Perfect Diary, which exploded onto the beauty category scene in August 2019, and was very disruptive to brands like L'Oreal here within the market, and very successful attracting Gen Z audiences. Now, fast forward to September 2019, we actually see them beginning to launch their flagship experiential retail stores in cities, trendsetter cities like Chengdu. So we've talked about quite a bit already. So let's talk about some of the key takeaways thus far. The first is that great experience needs to travel online to offline, offline to online. We need to look at how we can design user journeys that take into account and connect and complement both online and physical spaces. Now, within that, and thinking of those physical spaces that are really critical to us, retail remains absolutely key, and we're seeing enormous evolution here within the market. So particularly for Double 11, thinking about how physical retail factors into the user journey, triggers and incentivizes e-commerce purchases. Think of the add to cart behavior. I might not want to buy it today, but I might want to buy it tomorrow. How they can experience the product in real life, but ensuring that we're triggering conversion later on, let's say, a brand's Tmall store. And finally, as we think about those physical and digital experiences, ensuring that we're injecting shareability, because we know that shareability is a social currency. That street cred is absolutely essential. And what's more is that as we think about how we're injecting those shareable opportunities into experiences, we really enhance the ability for us to generate earned organic media across our activations. Now, that is just where we are today. These are the things we have to do today to succeed, but we also want to have our eyes on the future. So as we look forward, we're actually going to see that the lines between online and offline will continue to blur as the physical and virtual worlds collide in the age of the metaverse. Now, I think based on recent news, we're all quite familiar with this idea of the metaverse now. But just to recap, this is the virtual application of technologies like AR, VR, mobile technology that allows the virtual world to enhance our physical reality. It's the movies Free Guy or Ready Player One as dramatic visualizations of this. I think more realistically, we're seeing the appetite, particularly of mobile technology, to make this reality much sooner. Now, one interesting, fact about this is that, in a recent survey that showed, how much interest or engagement there was among general population for the metaverse, China yet again far outranks its peers. There's enormous buzz about what this future of the metaverse will hold across China's really dynamic media landscape.
And as a lot of these physical experiences and I'm now finding their way into the virtual world, we've heard a lot of conversation as NFTs or digital collectibles, as they're called in China, have exploded to the scene. We've seen a lot of recent application, in fact, of NFTs, right from the Mooncake Festival. We had Virtual Idol IIE distributing Tmall's Mooncake NFTs. To more recently, within Double 11, we've seen several brands already come into the fore with leveraging NFTs, including Burberry most recently. So this is a space that we at Mindshare are extremely excited about and believe has a very ripe future, especially given how much of a craving there is for exclusivity and exclusive experiences amongst the Gen Z here. We have a whole report on NFTs and implications in China and getting involved with it. This is a QR code for those of you who are enabled by WeChat. Please feel free to scan the QR code and download the report. But one of the reasons why we're so excited about the future of NFTs and believe that it's ripe is because of the way the ecosystems and the tech partners in China are evolving and reacting to creating their ecosystems, both from a software and hardware standpoint, to really, leverage NFTs. Whether it's ByteDance, whether it's Alibaba or Tencent, they have all come to the party and gotten involved with NFTs, with their own NFTs as well, in some cases working together with brands.
Right. So we know that looking forward, those lines between physical virtual worlds are going to continue to become very, very blurry. Ecosystems are setting the scene where hardware, software, and content are really, crossing and blurring those lines. And already we are seeing brands that are beginning to build a virtual presence or a virtual productization strategy by taking advantage of tools like NFT. So while today we're looking at how experiences online and offline can complement each other, I think looking forward, the nuance that's changing is that we're looking at how the virtual world and virtual technology can really enhance physical experiences, knowing that physical experiences are very critical even to an online purchase journey or our social online behaviors. So as you can see, the definition and possibilities of around experiences just continues to expand, or lines continue to blur. So to help narrow the focus, we're going to show you a bit of a very simple framework that allows us to choose the right or design the right experience based on ultimately what we want to achieve. Now, this framework is rooted in consumer mindsets. Where on the left side of this spectrum is a passive moment. A passive moment is I'm commuting to work and I see a very impactful out of home, or it's after a long day at work and I'm consuming the latest hot drama on iQIYI. Now, in these moments, we need to be able to push experiences that our audience is willing to absorb. On the other side of the spectrum, we are designing experiences for audiences in an active mindset. These are moments when they are sharing on social. They're playing the latest version of League of Legends with some of their best friends. So really actively engaged. In these moments, we need to pull our audience from that moment of existing engagement to a moment of brand interaction.
As in the case of any spectrum, there's obviously trade-offs to be made at either side. And, in the world of media, we're all too familiar with trade-offs already. So on the left, while you have experiences that will deliver high reach, those will typically be around scaled experiences, but there will be a trade-off to be made in terms of the level of involvement or engagement that they're able to generate. Whereas when it comes to experiences on the right, you have a more involved audience, and therefore you will be able to get a higher level of engagement. But usually there is a trade-off to be made in terms of the total reach that we're able to deliver. Now, what this spectrum allows us to do is think of multiple kinds of experiences that would sit across the spectrum and really think through on, to deliver that experience, what is the right kind of tools or platforms or technology that we might use. We've taken a few examples to bring these to life for you today. So on the extreme left, in the passive mindset, one of the examples would be for an identity building experience where you're trying to push your brand's message or your brand's experience to a largely passive audience. In a slightly more engaged environment will be an audience that's seeking entertainment, possibly a little more alert, a little more leaned into their favorite show that they're watching, and you want to insert your brand's message to be a part of that entertaining story that they are consuming. In a slightly more lean-in experience is where the audience is actively seeking information, where they're actively looking for some education. They're definitely pulled in to your category. The task here is really how you can pull them further down into your brand, further down into the funnel by providing them something which is truly adding value to their overall experience and their overall search. And finally, on the extreme right is a community, is a highly engaged audience, and typically one of the hardest audiences to talk to because you're already preaching to the choir here. But here, the level of involvement and engagement you want to deliver is something where you're able to convert an already engaged audience ideally into your advocates. We've picked a few recent examples from across our clients to bring these experiences to life in how we've worked with them to make this happen. I'll start with the first example for Lincoln. Now, some of you on the call would know that China is one of the largest automotive markets in the world, one of the most complex. We have literally a new car brand that launches here every day. So when Lincoln was looking to launch their first domestically produced car in China in the Nautilus, it wasn't an easy answer when they wanted to create a memorable experience that people would remember, that would create huge cut through. What they chose was a moment which was the Guangzhou Auto Show, a highly anticipated event by auto enthusiasts, and they actually created a constellation in the sky. A real delight and a memorable experience for those who saw it live, which involved multiple building takeovers, as well as literally 1,000 drones flying together in the Guangzhou night sky, creating this constellation. Now, it wasn't just a great, memorable experience for the thousands and millions who saw it live in Guangzhou, but for the millions that saw it via social sharing as well.
Now, Pizza Hut, on the other hand, is an example of a brand that is very focused on building experiences that entertain. Now, in this example, it wanted to really, dial up its engagement with younger audiences. So what it did is it partnered with the iconic comedy group Kaishen Mahua to bring some of that laughter into its physical restaurant spaces, as well as creating digital experiences through content that really unlocked engagement and enjoyment with its audience. Now, I think what's most critical about these type of experiences is that, they're not disruptive. They're not getting in the way of my dinner time. They're thinking about ways that are ultimately going to enhance that existing moment of enjoyment around a dinner table, whether it's at home with Pizza Hut or in a restaurant.
A great example of a brand that delivered a great education experience comes from Yili. Now, Yili is one of China's largest local dairy brands, and they were looking to deepen their connection with new moms for their infant formula milk. As we would know, and as they clearly Yili understood, that new parents are constantly in search for information. However, this information is not a problem to find because there is no dearth of information. The problem is that there's too much information, and it's not always available in the most easy to consume manner. You have to sift through loads of information to find what you need, especially when you're carrying a baby in one hand, it's the middle of the night, it's not the most suitable to go look for your phone to find that information. What they did is, in order to really enhance the experience for new parents, they did a partnership with Xiaomi with their smart speakers, so that no matter where you are in the house, no matter what time of day or night, you're simply able to ask your question to the Xiaomi smart speaker. And they had already fed in over 10,000 frequently asked questions to be answered through the Xiaomi smart speaker.
And finally, there is KFC. Now, KFC is a brand that has, long been focused on building community-centric experiences. In particular, the brand in early 2018 had already zoomed in on the esports community as a must-win audience. Now, if you remember, for community experiences, we need to think about how to design, very powerful and meaningful interaction that will convince an audience to go from a moment of existing interaction with their community to a moment of brand interaction. Now, to do this, KFC launched Kernel KI, which is an AI-built character that actually will predict some of the winners for major esports League of Legends matches. Now, this is something that already creates enormous conversation around who's going to win. With the help of Kernel KI, people's opinions are able to be shaped by KFC because they have this tool empowering them. So inherently, this has led to very strong brand interaction and really close connection with KFC being a champion of esports communities. Now, if we look at all of these, case studies and what the key takeaways are, when it comes to identity, where we're, pushing, a very, key brand message or our brand iconography, this is where we want to create memorability when our audience least expects it. For entertainment, we're always adding value rather than disrupting those existing moments of passive enjoyment. For education, like we saw in the case of Ely, how we're serving really core information that's curated and delivered at just the right moment. And finally, for community, how are we creating a rallying cry for community that's very believable to an authentic audience? And ultimately, to do that, it's supported by useful tools that are going to be very meaningful to this audience. So as a recap of this section, we've talked about where we are today, where we're headed next, and how we can get there. For today, we need to really be conscious of how important it is for URL and IRL, URL being digital world and IRL in real life, how they can go hand in hand and really complement each other because they fuel enormous social sharing, particularly here in China. And ultimately, they play a critical role in the decision-making process of Gen Z when it comes to their online purchase behaviors. But quickly on the horizon, if not already, is the metaverse, where we're going to see the physical and virtual worlds collide. And it's going to be very essential in how we can think about how the virtual world can enhance physical experiences. Now, as the possibilities of what experiences are and can be expands, we put in place a very simple framework rooted in consumer mindsets that allows us to narrow our focus based on objectives and design the right experience for the right objective. And with that, I'll turn back over to you, David. Obviously, we're very excited about the future of experiences.
Well, thank you very much indeed. That's been an absolutely fascinating and absolutely engrossing journey into, I suppose, the multifaceted nature of what an experience is going to be. And I think, you summed it up really well by talking about the whole notion of that actually the virtual experience, so that's at its ultimate, or at least ultimate that we can see at this stage, that the virtual experience is also going to enhance the physical experience. And I think that's going to be a very interesting interception as well. Akanksha, I just wondered if I could ask you, we've virtually run out of time, but I have loads of questions, but let's zero in on this one, which is one of the things that I think we're all learning about the 11/11 Global Shopping Festival is how trends that we see emerging during that festival then impact brands and retailers right across the world. You're a seasoned watcher of not clearly what's going on in your own market in China, but across the world. Do you see that we should be really looking at China to understand where experience is going to go in the future?
Oh, absolutely. We have no doubt about this. I think if you put it in the context of Double 11, very clearly, we started out, as you said at the beginning of the session, as a discount, or a shopping festival. Well, it's evolved from being a discount festival to being a shopping festival to today just being really a celebration around shopping, experiences, and brands. So this is a time when brands come out with some of their most engaging storytelling. This is a time, it has evolved I would have said that it is the Super Bowl of China, but actually it's way bigger than the Super Bowl of China, because it's not just about great storytelling. It's not just engaging people into watching or passive behavior, but it's actually something that engages people into all sorts of activity. Right from being glued to watching all kinds of live streams that brands are dishing out, all kinds of celebrity programming, and we've seen a whole lot of celebrity programming, new kinds of NFTs, to now really, very really new deals and exclusive offers, increasingly connecting online and offline. We've also worked with a lot of our clients on how they're connecting the journey between, their online to between their shopping, but also leading into long-term memberships and providing access to unique experiences. And therefore, the shopping festival is really an unlock into building a more long-term relationship with consumers. So I think the way Double 11 has evolved is definitely something that I see would be the trajectory that most brands, marketeers would be willing or looking to take across other parts of the world as well.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Thanks to you and also to Matthew. We could go on, but unfortunately, the grim reaper of time has paid us a visit, and we are going to have to end our session with you. Thank you very much indeed. If anybody wants to get hold of that publication you talked about, yes, there's the QR code. It's nice to see outside of China, the QR code through the pandemic has made a resurgence, so we're using those as well now. So please scan that on when you watch again, or you can get hold of either the two of them in order to get one emailed over to you. But for today, thank you very much indeed for joining us live from Shanghai. It's been, as I say, a fascinating journey through your lens of what experience is going to be, and I'm absolutely convinced that we are all going to have to embrace the experience world going forward. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.